Hello and welcome to our Lakeside chat. We are David Wofford and Katie Noonan, co-chairs of the Rotary Nature Center Friends. And we're so happy that you can join us tonight.
As we begin our program, it is important for us to acknowledge that we are on stolen land, that Lake Merritt is part of Ohlone territory. We hear now from Corinna Gould, spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of LaShawn and co-founder of Segura Te Land Trust.
Good afternoon, relatives. My name is Corinna Gould. I am the spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of LaShawn. We are here today at what most folks think of as Lake Merritt. We are in the territory of Huichin. Huichin is actually a territory that encompasses 6 Bay Area cities: Oakland, Berkeley, Alameda, Emeryville, Albany, and Piedmont. And so this is a place that my ancestors have been since the beginning of time. And this was a place of abundance. I'm so happy that people from all walks of life that now come into our territory can enjoy this beautiful place that my ancestors have enjoyed since the beginning of time. My relationship to the land that I have been born to, raising my children and grandchildren here, has been to tell the story, the truth of what happened on this land before other people came here. I'm hoping that as we begin to learn these lessons of fires in California, the pandemic that's happening, that human beings come back to living in reciprocity with the earth.
Well, thank you to Corinna for those words of wisdom. This was recorded in 2020, and as we proceed into the year and meet many challenges, that seeking reciprocity with the earth and realizing that it is not just reciprocity and transactionalism among people, but also that we need to consider our home, the earth, and what is happening and how we affect that and how we are interconnected, all of us. Totally reminded of this this afternoon while taking a group of young people around the lake and looking at some of the native plants and hearing from one of them about how her culture uses one of them in their medical practices and also in cooking, basically, in ways that I hadn't heard before. But by that kind of interaction that we can have with our fellow community members, we can all grow and hopefully achieve better reciprocity throughout the world with the planet, with the earth. Okay, so thank you all for being here. I will say more about Rotary Nature Center Friends and who we are at the end of the presentation, because now it is my pleasure to introduce the beginning of the program. As the title of our program suggests, there will be a wonderful presentation by filmmaker Brandon Jourdain, who's going to share the progress and some of his ideas for his feature movie about Lake Merritt, Reflections on Lake Merritt. And then after that, we will have a moderated panel discussion of the history of watersheds and watershed stewardship in Oakland, especially looking at Lake Merritt, but also other Oakland watersheds that are equally important, of course. So I would like to, at this moment, it's my pleasure to introduce Brandon. Brandon has appeared on Lakeside Chats at least once before, maybe twice. I met Brandon while he was filming part of this original movie, and he brought his young son down to Lake Merritt to look at the critters, and I had a nice conversation with him. Brandon is his bio is part of the Eventbrite that was sent to everybody, and if you missed it, I'm not going to read all of the many details, but he is an independent filmmaker and journalist and a writer. He's contributed to the New York Times, to Democracy Now!, now with Bill Moyers. I'm skipping a lot. His films have played in international film festivals and exhibitions, and he is just an amazing, diverse person with diverse abilities and artistic prowess. And we are so lucky to have him focus on Lake Merritt. He lives in Belgium now. And so I would like to welcome Brandon to begin our program tonight.
For better or worse, I don't think is there audio? Yeah. So for better or worse, we decided to make this a very complicated Lakeside chat. And I happen to do this. I mean, it's just the way it is. So I'm a video guy, obviously, and I do video. So the movie that I've been working on for the last few years, I'm actually working on it with Liam. So Liam has worked as a producer, and what that means exactly is he's helped set up a lot of the interviews. He did a number of the interviews. And he also just has been helping me with content as a historian. He's been very helpful. And then my wife is basically the executive producer, meaning that we came here on a grant from the European Research Council. And so the film really started because we were living by Lake Merritt, and the idea was to use the lake as a way to kind of tell both an environmental and a social history of Oakland. And so with the movie, we kind of start in the present and we're looking at all the things that are affecting Lake Merritt right now. So Lake Merritt has all these different qualities about it. One thing is it's a public park that brings us all together. It's also a wildlife refuge. So it's a place that people can come in contact with urban wildlife. And but then there are also these issues that it shows us. And I think that when we see issues, it's important not to turn away from them. So, you could look a few years ago when we saw what happened with the fish kill that happened and how sad that was for a lot of people. And that was also, I think some people didn't even realize there were so many fish living in the lake. But then the other things that we see here, there's unhoused people that live by the lake. There's sometimes conflicts around the lake. So this thing to both bring us together, but also show some of the issues we're facing. So that's why I thought it'd be interesting to make a movie about it and about the history of it. So we start in the present, and then we go back and we say, what was this place like 200 years ago before colonization? How did being dammed affect it? And things like that. So I'm going to show you a few clips right now.
So Lake Merritt is the first concept of a wildlife refuge in the nation, established in 1870. We precede Yellowstone by 2 years. It's a inner city saltwater lake. Always been here, and through no fault of its own, a city has developed around it.
Lake Merritt is referred to generally as the jewel of Oakland. It's the center of most of the social activity, about 10,000 people a day. Walk or jog or run the lake.
Lake Merritt is just so special. It's a little piece of the ocean that comes right to the doorstep of everyone in Oakland. But there's an amazing biodiversity in Lake Merritt that is just so much fun to watch.
People's attitudes about the lake have changed over time. I'm really happy to see so many people at the lake now. It's everybody now is at the lake. It's still a contentious space, and people are still fighting for the right to be there.
Folks are celebrating this 150 years of the lake being here as this sanctuary. It was a sanctuary for thousands of years before first contact.
What we are talking about often is who owns the space. With the people that buy property there, they feel like, I'm buying this lake. How dare you come and hang out there?
It's been a battleground that usually unfolds along racial and sometimes class lines.
It's just part of living in Oakland, is knowing you have this place to come that is a place for nature, it's a place for people. It's always been an important part of what this city is all about.
So a lot of this stuff is from a few years ago, so we're going to be updating that once we get a little bit closer to completion. Could you, Rob, could you go to the next video and just play that real quick? Yeah, that one. So in the process of making this, that's okay, you just go back. So in the process of making this, of course, we went through a lot of archival footage. And luckily, we did get a 10,000 euro grant recently to purchase archival footage. And we're also going to be doing some animation. Because I think, you know, when I started making this, I was trying to think of a way that we can make something that would be interesting to people outside of Oakland. And also use this as kind of also a way to kind of not just tell the story of Lake Merritt or Oakland, but kind of a tale of an American city. How these things come into all the things that happen to have to make an American city. And the one thing we don't want to do is for it to be boring. And so we're going to actually work hopefully with Fred Nolan and have him do some illustrations. And we're going to do some cartoons about the early Oakland history. But
no relation to the Nolan family that used to own the Oakland Tribune, by the way. Different Nolan.
So anyway, so there's this, yeah, you roll. So here's some of the archival.
Any Oakland story begins at Lake Merritt, even a story of its housing, for Lake Merritt symbolizes the good living of Oakland. This was not always true, for Lake Merritt was once a swamp, but Oakland had the courage to dream and to plan. And by a program of conservation and correction, the swamp became the pride of the city, a fine recreational center and wildlife refuge.
It was probably more in my 30s and 40s. I started really looking at what does the lake mean to us as Ohlone people here in our own territory, what it must have looked like when my ancestors, and this was a marsh area, it was full of tule that we used for our homes and our canoes. It was full of fowl that we could eat. It was full of oak trees that were around here for our food. So this was a rich environment that our ancestors would have wanted to be near. Where the little library was a village site there at the mouth. Where the Veterans Building is close to Whole Foods. There was a village site there. There was a shell mound that was right across from there. And a shell mound is our burial sites. Wherever there's fresh water and salt water that mix together is where our ancestors really created homes. And then on First Avenue, underneath the street and an apartment building, is another shell mound. And so there are these places that my ancestors lived for thousands and thousands of years around what we now see as a lake.
Okay, so I was going to show another clip, but I'm just going to skip it because we have a lot of people tonight. But what I'm going to do right now is just kind of take you through a little bit of history with Lake Merritt. And from the Ohlone period through basically the Spanish colonization, the Mexican period, up until the founding of Oakland. So Lake Merritt was one of the two largest sort of areas that the Ohlone used in this part of the Oakland. The other would be around Temescal Creek. So there were two village sites, as she says. But you know, the Ohlone people, which Ohlone is just a linguistic grouping, you know, so this would have been Huichin territory. And so, you know, we've talked about this. They would move different periods of time, but the ones who were here when the Spanish came, a lot of Ohlone died of disease by introduced, livestock and things like that. Some went into hiding, but a great deal of them were forced onto the mission system, which Karina will go into in the movie more, but I'm just going to summarize briefly. They were pretty much forced into labor. There was a widespread rape and abuse. And the Ohlone that would have been the Huichin territory were transferred, most of them to, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but by 1810, I think most have been moved to Mission San Jose. Now, there's another thing about Mission San Jose and its connections to Oakland. So the person, Luis Maria Peralta, was basically, he became I think it's called the Comisionado of Pueblo San Jose. And he got that, actually, part of the reason he got promoted to his position was in 1805, there was an attack on San Jose mission, which you can see why Native people wouldn't like these places. They were being forced to labor and raped there. And that doesn't seem like a place I'd want to go. So he went and hunted them down in Joaquin Valley. And then he was honored quite a bit. And then 1820, he ends up getting a land grant, which was one of the largest. And that was Rancho San Antonio. And that would have been all the way from San Leandro Creek all the way to Albany. And he never lived there, but his 4 sons did. And they had to establish residence within the first year to get it. So they moved here and established their presence in basically this whole area. When this was a slough, most people know that this is just a slough that is dammed and it has tidal gates. And that happened under Samuel Merritt, of course. But the slough at that time point would have been part of the bay. So they owned pretty much all this. And they got it there, like I said, the father got it more or less because of his treatment of Native people. But they didn't hold on to it because in 1848, even though the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo did honor those land claims, they were supposed to honor them. And it was also supposed to give Native people back part of the land. But what ends up happening is Carpentier, Moon, and Edson Adams come to Oakland. Actually, Adams came first, I think is the story, and actually came and tried to mark off 160 acres, and then one of the Peraltas came with his vaqueros and told him, hey, it's their land. He didn't believe them. He went back to San Francisco, brought Moon and Carpentier, and they also staked out land claims. And they came with 200 men. And eventually, somehow, Carpentier ends up being their lawyer. He kind of went to them and said, I'm a good guy. And then he founds Oakland in 1852 without most people even knowing it and calling it, a lot of people were referring to it as Temescal or Contra Costa. And then after founding it, and he had some connections in the state legislature, they have a meeting, which Adams was at, and they gave him the waterfront for 40 years. And that would have been all of the slough. So he technically owned all of Lake Merritt and all the waterfront. And he develops Oakland. But when people found out about it, they rioted. And what does he do? He sues the entire city and wins. And so everyone has to pay him. And eventually, though, he's got to push it out of mayor. And when he was elected, he got more votes than there were people. It was challenged, and they did support and say that he won, but I don't know. There's enough historical evidence to say something was fishy. And so the next real person that was a really major mayor, and I think something when it comes to Lake Merritt, would be Samuel Merritt. And I have some video on that, so you don't have to hear me ramble.
Dr. Samuel Merritt was an early Oakland settler, pioneer. He lived roughly 15th and Jackson Street. He also was a businessman. He built this massive hotel, Grand Central Hotel, which was on 12th Street near Harrison. He also built this huge lumber outfit.
He built the 12th Street Dam, which really turned this from a tidal estuary into what appears to be a lake, and why people started calling it a lake. The name that you would see on some maps at the time would be Lake Peralta, but people really came to associate this lake with Samuel Merritt because, again, he was the mayor at the time and he did these improvement projects around the lake. So people started calling it Merritt's Lake, and then Lake Merritt, hence the name.
At the time in San Francisco, this was during the gold rush, of course, and there was a big appetite for meat. There weren't many farms in the area. What people ate was mostly wild waterfowl. They would eat ducks. They would eat oysters from the sea. Those were their main foods. And so people would row over here from San Francisco with shotguns and shoot a bunch of ducks and fill their boat with ducks and bring it back to San Francisco and sell them for $1 a piece. Mayor Merritt wanted to put an end to that. So he prevailed upon his friends in the legislature to pass a law that forbid hunting in Lake Merritt.
Okay, yeah. By the way, this stuff's going to be color graded and stuff like that. I get sensitive about that. So when he's in the shade, you'll be able to see him. But I just wanted to put something together for today because, I don't know, it's what I have to do today. So anyway, I'm just gonna show a few more clips while I'm just right here. And I'm going to jump forward a little bit. So, I'm going to jump forward about 60 years or so. So since this is a Rotary Nature Center Friends event, I think it's only fair to pay a little tribute to Paul Cavell. People may have read the people are for the birds. And Jim, his son, did a great interview with me. And since the film is also, it's not just about corrupt mayors and things like that. There's plenty of that. But they're, we like the birds. So here we go.
Big less than big.
No, sorry, this is Fairyland.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
Fairyland was actually an idea brought back by Art Navalet. He and his wife visited Detroit, where the Belle Isle Zoo was, and they just opened a children's zoo. And each set in the children's zoo was a fairy tale set. Well, he came back and he thought Oakland could do it better. And so he got the Lake Merritt Breakfast Club and the Oakland Board of Directors to give land to Fairyland here at Lakeside Park, where we could build a children's playground. There was nothing else like it at that time. Where do you take the kids in 1950?
And I think what makes us unique, Fairyland in particular, is A, it's at the child's perspective. B, it's rooted in storytelling and kind of the narrative experience. And I think that Fairyland operates as an informal education space for young children as they learn to tell their own stories, as they learn to talk about arc and what it means for a character to go from here to there, early childhood acquisition of letters and reading. I think that happens all through the ways we tell our stories here at the park. It's so strange to have such a vibrant park with lots of opportunity for imagination and learning right in the middle of the city, right on the jewel of Lake Merritt.
Okay, well, that's cool, too. So one thing I think is interesting about that, there is a tie between Paul Cavell and Fairyland. So this all happens under, I think, William Mott Jr.'s period of time where he was a Parks Commissioner and Director, sorry, the superintendent. You see his title there. So back to what I actually meant to show. It doesn't matter, though. We're having fun here, right?
My dad's role here really started out connecting the people to the waterfowl. I think that's what he always wanted to do, was make sure that everybody understood this incredible resource and they had a chance to observe nature right here in their front yard. And he had some other responsibilities beyond that. The city kind of expected him to be the refuge manager here, since this is the nation's oldest waterfowl refuge. You should have somebody that is keeping an eye out for water quality and the health of the birds that are here, and also kind of helping with human interactions also to make sure that those stay on the positive side. This area, and this is actually the second iteration where these pedestals are today, there were cages on these pedestals, and the cages were home to a variety of native wildlife. So we had raccoons and opossums and skunks, and actually had a coyote here for a little while. But it was a chance for people to meet some of the native wildlife they might not even be aware of, even though these animals might be roaming their neighborhoods at night. Maybe folks had never seen a skunk or an opossum or a raccoon. So they had a chance to come down here and learn a little bit more about some of their wildlife neighbors. The Nature Center functioned for so many years as kind of a place where people could bring their families here, and their kids could watch the bees in the beehive or learn about the birds out on the lake. They could launch from here onto a bird watching walk around the edge of Lake Merritt. And so it was really, again, a place where the community gathered to explore the nature that was right around them. And it was a home for the naturalist program. I don't think you can find anybody in Oakland that grew up here in the 1950s, 60s, 70s that didn't have somebody from the Nature Center, often my father, come out to their school and do programs, or they came here on a school field trip, or both. It was a huge resource for the citizens of Oakland.
Okay, so here's some clips. Nice. Those are clips of stuff in progress. Music, images, things like that will change. As I say, we're going to be working with animations. We're going through. So I'm really happy we got the money to get the archival stuff. That's crucial. That's stuff like that costs a lot of money. We'll still have to do more spending on archives, more money on the animation, more money that I don't have. So it's cool that we're able to do this benefit. It's probably the last in-person kind of benefit we do for the film. We're trying to do some grant writing. And we're still like these times it's really tough to get money, especially for stuff that's like critical history. People basically don't want to fund it, but Trump doesn't want to fund it. And the NEA cut all the money to the California Center for Humanities. So last year I did the whole webinar and then was busy, so I didn't actually get the grant in. But then I found out that people that did get the grant, they got letters that they weren't getting the money. The NEA cut all their funding. So yeah, but I the thing is, like, we've got a lot of support for the project and we're pushing ahead with it. And I have no doubt we're going to finish it. I'm taking 3 months off to edit it. And then we're lucky that Dan Hale is an animator. He got research leave to work on the project. So the university's paying him. So that's $35,000 of our budget contributed by the university. So he's going to do a lot of the parallax thing with photos, bringing them to life, and also doing when we get our illustrations done, he's going to bring them to life. And so we're going to do a Carpentier cartoon that I think you'll like. And then we also have other people's stories about the lake, Boots Riley, and people like that. We're going to weave all these stories together to kind of tell a history of this beautiful resource we have right here. And there's some of the and we'll touch on some controversial stuff, but we're trying to we've talked to a lot of people. We've talked to anybody from people that live around the lake and have had issues with noise, to also people who've had the police called on them and are mad. So but I think it's important that you don't back away from this stuff, because if we don't really get into it, if we don't really explore these conflicts, then we don't come to solutions. And you can't look away. So anyway, that's a little bit about the project. I could show a few more clips, but we have a full panel tonight. Yeah. So and I'm known to be sort of loquacious, and so I'm gonna open it up to other people. And if you want to see more of the project or anything like that, let me know. If you want to donate, I can tell you to do that. But I'm gonna turn the mic over to Liam.
And
we'll do a Q&A at the end after the panel.
Katie, was there something you wanted to say?
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you so much. We will be providing in a post event letter the link where you can make a donation, and also lots more video and so forth that we've done through our Lakeside chats that might be interesting to you. And I know we certainly have a couple of them that Brandon did, where you could get another chance to take a look.
Oh, so just one. I just want to really thank Isaac and his family for letting us. This is great.
Thank you so much. My name is Liam O'Donohue. I host a show called East Bay Yesterday. Thank you, Gene. Thanks to everyone who's been listening and supporting that show for almost a decade now. Really appreciate it. And I've been working on this film with Brandon for about 4 or 5 years now as well. So thanks to everyone who's been listening to the podcast, coming out to the events, supporting the film, and everyone who came out here tonight, especially Katie and David from the Rotary Nature Center Friends for organizing this, and of course the several people have mentioned already, Isaac and his family for hosting us on this beautiful Friday evening. Now, one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated by creeks is because I kind of feel like going down into a creek bed can feel a little bit like traveling back in time. I live walking distance to Saucil Creek, and the journey that takes me over to Salsal Creek. I cross the 580, walk down along MacArthur, past a bunch of businesses, go through a residential neighborhood, up through Diamond Park. And then when I get there, in that creek bed, in that gorge, surrounded by greenery and a lot of native plants now, thanks to the Friends of Salsal Creek, it's so much easier for me to imagine what Oakland looked like hundreds of years ago, back when all the creeks here ran wild and free. In the last couple of months, I've attended a few events about creek restoration and local watershed history. And something that I've noticed is that a lot of people who are devoted to this kind of work, everything from volunteers to career scientists and government workers and volunteers and educators, so many of them first fell in love with creeks when they were kids. People fall in love with creeks. If you grew up by a creek and you played in it, I think that memory stays with you for your whole life, because they really can feel like a magical place, like a little oasis, especially when you live in a city like Oakland or even a suburban area, Katie, like where you grew up in Walnut Creek. I know you grew up playing in creeks.
I did.
And I think that I'm going to ask you a question about that in a little bit.
Okay.
But since then, since a lot of us, grew up playing creeks, since we were children, a lot of those creeks have been, polluted over the years, or even worse, some of them have been covered up, culverted, filled in. But the good news is, and this is something I've been learning a lot lately, is that there's been a ton of progress in the last couple decades. There was a movement that started up in Berkeley at places like Strawberry Creek to daylight creeks, to open them back up, to rewild them, to plant native plants. Salsal Creek, another great example that's really a model for creek restoration that we're going to be talking about tonight. And so I know we're getting a little bit of a late start, so I'm just going to jump right into the questions, because I know a lot of you came here specifically to hear about the Lake Merritt watershed and the creeks that feed into this beautiful lake that we're looking down at right now. And I'm going to kick things off. I should do a quick little bio introduction before I jump into the questions. I'll keep the bio short, because like Katie said, you probably already read about these wonderful people on the Eventbrite. But just in case you didn't, Andrew Alden right here, one of my favorite Oakland authors, wrote a great book called Deep Oakland a few years ago for Heyday Books, and has been publishing a long-running blog about Oakland geology and the ground beneath our feet called Oakland Geology, very appropriately titled blog for many years. Katie Noonan, you all know, the co-founder with David Wofford of Rotary Nature Center Friends. Christina McGee Escobar, am I pronouncing that right? You are a high school biology teacher at Skyline High and a product of the Oakland Unified School District. Katie was your former teacher and inspired you. And we're going to be hearing a lot about your connections to Oakland and bringing the classroom into the field and getting kids excited about learning about our incredible ecosystems here in the East Bay. And sitting right next to me, Jennifer Stern, the project manager for the Lake Merritt Water Quality Management Pilot Project and the upcoming Lake Merritt Healthy Lake Initiative. And we're going to be talking a lot more about what you do in a few minutes as well. So I'll just hold the rest of the bio for there. Well, let's kick things off with you, Andrew. Let's start with a broad overview. I mean, I know there's some real hardcore Lake Merritt science nerds in the audience tonight, but there's probably a lot of people who don't know a ton about this area yet and want to know more. So can you explain to us which are the creeks that flow into Lake Merritt? What are they called? Where are they located? And how did they form?
Yeah, thanks, Liam. The Lake Merritt is served by 4 or 5 named creeks. There's Glen Echo Creek on the north, and then Pleasant Valley Creek, which runs underneath Grand Avenue. There's Wildwood Creek, which runs down Lakeshore, Upper Lakeshore. And there is Indian Gulch Creek, also known as Trestle Glen Creek, which feeds into Wildwood? And anyway, they all flow into the lake. There's also 2 smaller creeks. There's one on 20th Street, that's where I live, at the foot of Snow Park, little tiny one, and a small one that runs down Park Boulevard through that canyon and comes out at the 18th Street boat landing where you never see any boats. Every one of those creeks has its headwaters in a small range of hills. It's on this side of the high hills, It's on this side of the Hayward Fault. And it's the set of hills that the city of Piedmont sits on, plus the Oakland neighborhoods around Piedmont. And it is those hills that have given us Lake Merritt. Lake Merritt and the hills and the streams that connect them are a single geomorphological entity. The hills have been uplifted for about 1 million years. They were uplifted by the Hayward Fault, and the streams formed on it, and they have been undisturbed for 1 million years. And because of their position near the bay, they have a different relationship to gravity. They when rain falls on them, they come down in a big unified flush that streams in the hill and the high hills can't achieve, because once they hit the fault, they get bent, they get turned. So all of our other streams like Saucil Creek, San Leandro Creek, so on, they have not been able to dig the same trench that the hills of the Piedmont Block have to create Lake Merritt. So what's below comes from what's above, and that's the simple geological story of Lake Merritt and the creeks that feed it. Now, over 1 million years, we have had several ice ages, and every ice age, you've got ice building up on the poles, and the ocean shrinks down when the ice ages come. And when the ice melts, the sea rises. And today the ice is melting. The sea has risen to fill the valley that gets dug during each ice age, during the cold periods. So to me, geologists have million-year eyes, And I see Lake Merritt as coming and going over and over every 100,000 years or so for the last 1 million years. And it's a kind of spacey thing to know. And I've tried to share that with Oakland, because Oakland is a spacey city, particularly in the cannabis age, And it's just really cool. And before we move on, we were talking about Samuel Merritt and his dam, and nobody really makes it clear why he did that. Well, we say, yeah, he was a landowner. He wanted to clean up the lake. That's why he had his friends in the state government declare it off limits to hunting. But the real reason for the dam was it had tide gates. So the tide would come in, they would shut the gates, and there would be a nice reservoir a couple feet above sea level. That was the foundation of Oakland's first sewage system.
So it was basically flushing out the lake because there was things in the lake that people didn't want to smell. How do you get rid of it? Rise the level and then push it out along 20th Street, right?
The lake was an open-air sewer at the time. And so the scheme was you would let the water in, and you would dig a big sewer tunnel directly to the bay. And they did that right down 20th Street, which is the lowest, easiest way to the bay.
If anyone is trying to picture where 20th Street is, just imagine that part over by the Kaiser building that's been under construction forever. That section.
Yeah. And so that was the reason, and it supposedly worked for a while, but you can imagine there's only like a couple of feet of head, and the thing had to flow 10,000 feet to the bay. So that's a pretty sluggish sewer system. And within a decade, all the doctors in the city of Oakland sent a letter to the city council saying, please, is this so disgusting and such a health hazard? Could you please fill in the lake, get rid of it?
Yeah, luckily they didn't do that.
But that's the story of the dam. And I didn't know that myself till just the other day.
Really important to know that. Will you pass the microphone to Jennifer? So Jennifer, you work for the city of Oakland. And I feel like a lot of people probably aren't that familiar with like the city's relationship with its creeks. Like, the city's responsibilities for its creek. So can you explain to people what your department does, what you do? And I know that, just to give one example, you were involved with the recent Cortland Creek restoration that's been getting a lot of great news coverage lately. So if you want to kind of use that as an example to illustrate the kinds of stuff that the city does with our creeks, I'd love to hear about that.
Great. Thank you, Liam. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Just to start off, I also fell in love with creeks as a kid. So
there you go.
Okay, just a sec here. Let me make sure. So the question was about what is the city's responsibilities? So I'll kind of start off with saying what my job is at the city. And so I'm a watershed program specialist, and I work in within public works. The watershed and stormwater management does the engineering and project delivery work that's involved with repairing the city's storm drainage system. That as we can, because we have limited funding at this time, we don't have a secured funding stream for doing that work. But
sounds important.
It is. Yeah, it is important. We have an aging stormwater system in the city of Oakland, and so it is important. You'll probably be hearing more about that in the next couple of years. We're hoping to secure some funding for that, so we can we're actually in the midst of doing a storm drainage master plan. So that's an evaluation of all of the storm drainage infrastructure in the city. So I don't know if people have heard about it, but we've sent out cards asking for people to let us know about issues and flooding in their neighborhood and so forth. So we also coordinate compliance within the city with a stormwater permit that is issued by the state's Regional Water Quality Control Board. And so I don't know if people are familiar with this, but this permit is one way the state and federal stormwater protection laws, such as the Clean Water Act, are implemented. So there's a lot of, basically through that, through our compliance, we are coordinating pollution prevention programs across the city to try to keep pollution out of our waterways. And some of this compliance work is done collaboratively through the Alameda Countywide Clean Water Program. So that's includes all the cities in Alameda County, the county itself, Flood Control District, Zone 7 Water Agency. We all work together to try to address pollution. And so when it is cost effective, we collaborate on things. So most of the water quality monitoring that's required is done through the Clean Water Program. Outside of the water quality monitoring we've been doing at Lake Merritt, which if you're not familiar with, we have continuous water quality monitoring at 4 different stations in the lake. That's been going on since January of 2023. So we have a dashboard that you can check out if you just look up Lake Merritt water quality. It should come up on Google. And that's focused on looking at the dissolved oxygen levels, but also includes like temperature and some salinity, some other parameters as well. Just to finish about the Clean Water Program, there's also the Clean Water Program does a lot of our outreach, like our fun public outreach. And maybe some of you are familiar with these little puppets called Fred and Izzy. And they're they're the mascots for the Clean Water Program. And so they're these little videos that are intended for the younger audience, but they're talking about, pollution prevention and, sweeping, don't hose your driveways, things like that. And so those are all produced through the Clean Water Program. And then also they do an interactive booth at the county fair. They do grants to community groups and schools, and one of which Katie's Rotary Nature Center Friends just received one of those grants. So that's exciting to do some water quality monitoring in Glen Echo Creek. Is that?
Yes. Well,
yeah.
Glen Echo and Lake Merritt as well.
And Lake Merritt. So more on that. Yeah. And the storm, and we also the videos I mentioned with Fred and Izzy. So there's like a couple more things. You can cut me off if you need to, but
Just since we're doing, I think like it's really exciting what's happened at Cortland Creek. So maybe
Yes,
you can give like a
I'll
kind of a
talk
short
about
overview of that, because I feel like that kind of helps. Like a lot of these concepts are sort of like abstract, like it's below the ground, people don't see it, but when you see a transformation like Cortland Creek, I think it gets people really excited about the potential for the kind of work that you do.
Definitely. And just one more thing on the unexciting pollution prevention stuff is when you do submit a 311 request about pollution, any kind of pollutant going into the storm drain, inlet, or the street or the creek, it's either me or one of my colleagues that responds. So we would, if there's something being dumped, we would go in person or make a phone call or write a letter. So that's just an example of one thing that is in my job. So we also do a lot of other things to be in compliance with that permit, but I'll talk about Cortland Creek. And I wanted to also highlight Oakland's Creek Protection Ordinance, which, raise your hand if you're familiar with Oakland's Creek Protection Ordinance. One person. Okay. Oh, and Nick.
Maybe some people on the Zoom are raising their hands. Okay. We just can't see.
Well, I'm going to just spend 1 minute talking about it. So we have the authority to require people to comply with the pollution prevention, through our permit, but also through the city's creek protection ordinance. So it makes it illegal to discharge pollutants, trash, chemicals, sediment into our storm drainage system or creeks. And this creek protection ordinance was established in 1997. It's basically established to protect the city's creeks and watersheds. So it's a very important ordinance. It's what guides all of our work. It was some aspects were the result of community meetings and policy discussions, kind of back to what Liam was saying, like there's been progress in creek restoration, and there was a growing awareness of the importance of creek restoration. So in the 90s and led to the Creek Protection Ordinance. We have a guide to the Creek Protection Ordinance on our website that makes it easy to read, because you may not want to read like the actual ordinance. It requires properties with creeks and properties that are contiguous to creeks, so like neighboring, to get a creek protection permit before performing work or projects. So it aims to minimize the negative impacts on creeks from construction or adding like an impervious surface like paving, and ensuring the long-term health of our creeks. And our division conducts technical review of the creek protection permit applications. The planning and building department actually issues those permits, but we provide review and comments. Oakland's creeks are a valuable resource to the city. The creekside vegetation protects the channel, the water, and provides habitat for wildlife. Many of us in this room know that, and provides access to nature in the city, which we all enjoy at Lake Merritt. And now the Watershed Division, we recently completed the Cortland Creek Restoration Project. We've delivered many creek restoration projects over the years using with local, largely measured DD of funding, state, and county, state, and federal funding as well. We use the measured DD funding to leverage to get outside grants for our projects. So that was in 2002, over 20 years ago, when voters passed Measure DD, the Oakland Trust for Clean Water and Safe Parks, and the bond measure allocated funds for projects, including creek restoration, improvements around Lake Merritt. A lot of the improvements we've seen came from that bond measure, and established the Watershed Acquisition and Preservation Program, which has provided some conservation easements to protect ecologically valuable land in Oakland. And also we've purchased some land too. So some conservation easements and some purchases. And so back to Cortland Creek, which I've been working on since 2019, and I'll continue to work on because we'll be doing monitoring of the project. But I managed the project in partnership with the Friends of Cortland Creek and Melrose 27X Neighborhood Council, Oakland Parks and Rec Foundation. There was a lot of community involvement.
I just want to pause there for 1 second.
Yeah.
So I really think that's important to emphasize how many of these projects are a partnership between, city groups and different government organizations, but tons of volunteer effort as well.
Yes.
Like a lot of these groups, like Friends of Sausal Creek, maybe there's like a small paid staff, but huge reliance on volunteer and donated labor, which, we definitely appreciate here in Oakland. Because a lot of people are pitching in to,
We do,
make Oakland beautiful and like restore these important ecosystems.
Definitely, Liam. Yeah, and I started working at the City of Oakland with the Adopt a Spot program, which is a volunteer program. So that's how I first met Katie. I spent 5 years working with volunteers. So that was, very, very good. Okay, let me see. So just really quick about the project. We just had the ribbon cutting last month, and it was a great event. Councilmember Gaio was there. Thank you for attending. So the project removed invasive plants and trash, improved creek habitat. It interrupted some chronic illegal dumping that was going on, like really bad, in this cul-de-sac at the end of the park. And people were just feeling unsafe in the park. It just wasn't getting used. So we did a lot of like grading to stabilize the creek banks and kind of, lay back. It was very steep and incised. And we removed a ton of eucalyptus trees and other invasive vegetation, replanted everything with native plants. And we added accessible seating, gathering spaces, creek viewing overlook. We resurfaced all the trails. We added some really beautiful interpretive signs done by the same artists that did all the signs around Lake Merritt. That was also a project I worked on. And so we did all of this and added some public art to the park too as well, which is really fun because we had a lot of community involvement with that. And so in 1997, another thing that happened in 1997 is that this park was first established in 1997, Cortland Creek Park, through a collaboration between the Friends of Cortland Creek and the City of Oakland. So it was going to be developed, and we weren't going to have a creek there. There was no existing park. So basically it's a success story. They were able to save the creek, and the city worked to buy up some properties all around the creek to make it a park, and has some conservation easements on some property. So it was a it took about 10 years to get there, but through a lot of community work, we were successful, and now we have a ongoing, bunch of stewards that are taking care of the park. Neighbors are really invested, and so,
what a wonderful show tonight. We thank our hosts, Isaac Koss-Reed and his family, Brandon Jordan for her brilliant movie and discussion, Rob Lamone for production, amazing. Our panelists, Andrew Alden, Christina McGee, myself, New Voices Are Rising externs and fellows, Lake Merritt Institute, Lake Merritt Boating Center, and Oakland. Thank you to our supporters. We want to thank New Voices Are Rising, the Green Team at Cristo de Rey de la Salle East Bay High School, the Youth Employment Partnership, Achieve, and the Alameda County Clean Water Program for supporting our activities this summer. We want to thank KTOP TV in Oakland for rebroadcasting Lakeside Chats every Sunday evening from 6 to 7 p.m. In the first part of the month, we have repeat programs that are rebroadcast, and at the end of the month, they rebroadcast the current Lakeside Chat. We take this opportunity to announce our new California Naturalist course that was going to be offered this fall, hosted by Rotary Nature Center Friends. We would like to announce coming up on Friday, August 8th at Lakeside Chat 57 with Dr. Amy Borges from Laney College. She will speak on climate change, students and stress. On Friday, September 5th, our next Lakeside Chat is going to be given by Mark Razan, entitled An Update, Russia, U.S. Climate Change Chaos, Native Communities, and Bering Sea Ecology. And we will have more activities as we go into the fall. If you enjoy what you do, please consider making a donation to Rotary Nature Center Friends via our donation button on our website. We are Rotary Nature Center Friends at Lake Merritt, an independent, all-volunteer 501c3 nonprofit since 2021, providing online and in-person programming for all the people of Oakland.
In a minute, but I want to make sure I get to Christina. Can you pass the mic to her? We haven't heard from you, Christina. And I feel like one way to kind of connect what you both are going to be talking about is that I think for people to care about watersheds and creeks, that like understand what they are and why they're important. And that brings us to the educational component that you have so much personal history with. First, you were a student under Katie learning about the lake and the watersheds, and now you're a teacher teaching the next generation. So can you kind of take me through that journey? Like, what got you interested in learning about watersheds, and then how did you kind of continue on through that and make it, you know, a career teaching biology now to high school students?
So I grew up in Oakland. I went to Oakland schools, and I really started getting into science when I got to high school. And it wasn't until like the year that I was in high school, they gave us an option to choose what science classes we wanted as we were coming in as ninth graders, which I don't think they do anymore. They realized that wasn't a great way to start them off. But I took chemistry to start, and then I got to get into biology, and I thought that really set me up for success in taking biology. I think of chemistry as a foundational science. And one day there was a presentation from Environmental Science Academy students about joining. And back then there were only two academies. There was VAPA, which is the arts, and environmental science. I signed up, and one of the best decisions I ever got to make. It was one of the reasons I got to go to Santa Cruz. I did my undergrad in environmental studies. I really fell in love with this project that we did. I mean, we did a ton of field trips. We went and did restoration projects, but once a week, or it was once or twice a week, we got to go from Oakland High and run to the boathouse. And that's what we did. We did dissolved oxygen levels. We looked at plankton. We did plankton tows. We did salinity and Secchi depth and all these really cool things when we were at the boathouse. And it was all about what's up with Lake Merritt. And it was really my first intro to like the natural space. I grew up, and I mentioned I grew up in Oakland on 23rd or East 14th. And so it's a very concrete area. There's not a lot of space for me to go out and play. And that was my first time to be able to go out and play, which was the outdoors. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that kind of brings me to is becoming an educator. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I didn't have money to go to college when I first graduated high school. I went to Laney. I took science classes. I was able to transfer to Santa Cruz and get my degree. But everything in that was everything in my journey was centered around like, where are the outdoor spaces that were important to me, and who are the people that I was connected to that made them important. I operate a lot on me owing the community that supported me to be able to get to where I'm at. And for my students, that translates into what can I do that supports their interest? So one of the reasons I became a teacher was so I joke about it now, but it was like so they could have a better life than me. We didn't grow up with a lot of resources. We had what we needed, but I wanted my students to have more. Just like everyone wants their kids to have more, I want my kids to have more. So throughout the years of me teaching, because I started teaching in 2016, always biology, but I've done all the sciences at some point or another, minus geology. So I was always focused on what is it that students are connected to, and they always say my community, my family, and I always ask, like, what does that mean? What do you mean my community? What is it about your community? Is it the stores? Is it your friends? Is it your phone? And then, and from there I started trying to find additional they're called professional developments, or PDs, and I started learning what is special about Oakland, what is special about the science that exists in our community, and I brought that to my students. And sometimes they were really into it, and sometimes they weren't, which is fine. That's one of the fun things about teaching. You can kind of do whatever you want. But I learned that from Ms. Noonan, which is also why I have this notebook, because she was big on science notebooking. I was taking notes in the back. But it all leads back to this idea of, like, students are going to make changes, positive changes, if we allow them space to dream. And so you because I am not the master of every single topic, I need to go out and learn so that I can bring those things to my students. And it results in, like, a lot of changes in my curriculum throughout the years. But this center on their belonging and their purpose in their community.
Yeah. And speaking of purpose, Katie, I know that, in your educational practice, that was great, Christina, by the way. But speaking of purpose, I know that a lot of the citizen science projects, Katie, that you've done with students over the years aren't just, for fun. Science can be very fun, and, like, you're teaching kids how to do it, but this is useful information that you're gathering as well. Like these citizen science projects, it's informing what the city, what the community, what we all know about Lake Merritt. So tell us about some of, like, the research that you've done with students like Christina and other groups. What are you doing now? And, like, why is the science actually important? Because I know it's very important, but maybe when people just see you out there with, like, beakers and, notepads and stuff like that, they're like, what's all this for? So what is it all for?
Thank you. Oh, well, thank you so much. Here I am thinking about my childhood. But I wanted to mention, we should mention, I think it might have been in her bio, that Christina was able to make engagement with other organizations that do, like Friends of the River, and so forth. She received a special award for involving young people in her generation in taking care of the environment, the wild environment. And she also recently wrote a paper about how to engage students by considering their needs and their points of view. And I think that's I'm very proud of her. And I gave her notebook back, I think, about a year ago. I copied parts of it because it was so wonderful. I did want to say something about my childhood, if I can just digress a moment, because I'm the oldest of a baby boom family, a large one. And for me, the creek did not, my family moved into Sherman Acres. They rented a place in Sherman Acres in Pleasant Hill, which was right across the street from Walnut Creek, the actual Walnut Creek. And at that time, it was relatively a wild creek. And we spent many hours in my, like from the 10 to 12 years old, playing in the creek. And for me, it was a chance to have freedom. It was not like a precious little place, but it was like, we were free to run up and down the creek barefoot. And we got to know all of the creatures that lived there. Some of them are still there, even though the creek has been culverted. I did some looking at it. I was just amazed at that. But for me, it was wonderful that I was able to spend time in in wild nature, unsupervised really, and able to do that. And while I was there, I would often imagine what it was like before, the people, when the indigenous people were there, and it was a very romantic idea then, for kids, and I think that might be still true today in some extent. But it really was an eye opener, a window, more than just a little place to retreat to. And I think I would like to mention also that my family, we lived there in the 1950s, and that was a time of a lot of rainfall and flooding because, and my family was, we were not flooded out, but across the street, the houses were flooded out and people were, in the Great Flood of, I think, 1958 in Walnut Creek, they went out in boats. We were able to get out before that because we were on the high side of the street, which kind of gave me a sense that that nature can be wild and it can be dangerous sometimes, which I think is something that people, when you have a manicured park and manicured activities that are not open to what's there, you lose that. And I see that as a value of Lake Merritt for the young people who come here and who do community science here, is that they can see what's really going on. Mm-hmm. And maybe it isn't what they've been told. Maybe it's something different. Maybe they can start to think about how we could find out more. And also they can connect what they're seeing here with something not just here in their nice little neighborhood, but you can't really understand Lake Merritt and the without understanding the bigger picture about other. If we're looking at a wildlife refuge with migratory birds, we're dealing with the whole United States and maybe 2 continents and maybe even more.
Right.
And to have that
the lake
point
is part of the bay, which is part of the ocean. It's all connected.
Yes, and all the things that we're seeing here are related to that. And I think that kind of perspective is invaluable and will help us in the future to try to do a little better than we're currently doing right now.
I hope so.
In stewarding our environment. So you wanted me to get back to some of my projects. So when I started teaching in 1990 at Oakland High School, it was my very first school I ever taught in, and we had a budget of like 25 cents per student per year.
And even back then, that wasn't very much money.
No, it didn't. And so when I heard about opportunities for teachers to get money to form projects like academies or to engage in things like there was the Sea Lion, but then National Ocean Sciences Bowl and the GLOBE program. And you could go do things and they would give you stuff and they would take you on field trips. And there was a wonderful organization called the Bay Area Science and Technology Education Consortium, which I got a bunch of creek testing materials for. And I took kids up to the creeks up in the hills above 580, actually. We started at the top and we went to about 3 places. At the bottom, we were out there testing the water and looking at creatures when somebody came out on a balcony with a shotgun and we had to make a very hasty retreat. but not before we got some data and we were able to write it up. And so it was very exciting times and a little bit of, taking a few risks and a little bit of danger and all that, and made it really a lot of fun. So what have I been doing? I'm really proud of my long history of community water testing. There are basically 5 things that water quality scientists test, whether you're getting millions of dollars from somebody or whether you're just somebody doing a simple project. And they are like dissolved oxygen, turbidity, salinity, and something that pH. I mean, I got 5 up there now. Yeah. So I think that's something that I like students to know, that we're out there testing the same things that scientists are doing. And we started in 1997 when we got seed money from the state of California Department of Education to what was supposed to form a field station at the boathouse at Lake Merritt. It was going to be involved. It was going to lend tools and play a place for people in schools all over Oakland, and that never came to total fruition. But we did have a few collaborative things with Laney and so forth. But anyway, that that started it. And so I have data collected by students from 1997.
And people hadn't been testing the Lake Merritt water quality before that?
No, they had. I do believe they had, in fact. But this is like every week we do it,
Got it. Okay.
And so it's like monitoring is really important. Managing is sometimes needed, but can you really manage unless you've really monitored and taken a little more of a long view? We went through the long drought periods up to like in the like 2012 to 2015, 16 or something like that. And the water quality became very boring because it didn't much change over all that time. But then we'd have a time when there would be atmospheric rivers coming down and periods of freshness in the lake, and a lot of changes would happen. And students could see that I think that's one thing that I have learned about water quality in Lake Merritt, that it's variable. And it depends a lot on weather and on a number of things. Is impacted a lot by what people throw into the lake. That's true. But there are many other factors that we need to know about. And we're not going to know about them if we're always trying to jump in with our notions of what we might do. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's great to get the trash out. It's really great it's very great to have the creek ordinance and not dump things in. That's really important. But there are other things that are going on, especially as climate changes, that all of the stuff that we did is going to be valuable to take a look at and see, oh, that's what happened then, and is it happening more now? And what's happening are we seeing more layers? We saw a lot of layers back then, not seeing so much anymore right now. Yeah. And that's kind of interesting. So anyway, projects we have done with students. We did a project with the EPA looking at E. coli in the lake. And I jumped on every project I could, and we were able to have students collect water samples. They chose locations in the lake to take them. They collected the sample according to protocol, and we drove out to the lab in Richmond, which no longer exists because it disappeared with the first Trump administration. But they used to take classes out there, and we would walk the water samples through all of the tests, and so they could see what was, what was in the water. And yes, there is E. coli in the water. There's E. coli in all of us, So there's just interpreting that is a nuance of science that you can get from being an active citizen, community scientist at Lake Merritt.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Well, I just know, I feel like we've got a lot of...
I could go on and on. So I will encourage you to come to our website and see some of the pictures of the stuff that we're doing. It's such a window on the world here that we have if we treasure it and we use it.
I just want to say that you've done all this stuff with students, but you've also done a lot of stuff to help the city and the water board kind of monitor what's going on. So every time we have something going on in the lake, Katie's the first one out there, and she's like, already got the sample, and we're like, all right, did you find anything? so thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good example of how you can hold on to it. Just how or actually, can you hand to Andrew? Yeah. How citizen science, there's a huge amount of value to that. The work that people like Katie that you're doing and the students that you're working with. Isaac, I do want to be mindful of your time. I know that you're okay for us to keep going, because I know that we had a little... Okay, thank you. Again, your graciousness is... you're amazing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Just want to wear our welcome here. Andrew, I wanted to come back to you because on your amazing Oakland geology blog, which, again, I can't recommend it highly enough. I've learned so much about Oakland from reading your blog. You had a great entry on Glen Echo Creek, which is the creek that kind of flows down from Mountain View Cemetery. Behind Gross Out, kind of parallel to Broadway, grocery outlet for anyone who's not familiar, and empties onto the side of the lake, the kind of north side of the lake, northwest side. And in that post, you have a quote that really struck me about how one of Oakland's great civic failures was its inability to preserve its natural streams. So I was wondering if you could just sort of unpack what that means and why that was such a failure.
Well, I guess the way to put it is Oakland was developed by people who didn't respect nature very much. Streams were nuisances. And if you wanted to make a lot of money, you would... the scheme they all did was they would establish a stage line, a public transit line out of their property, And maybe they'll build an attraction at the end. But the big deal was to subdivide the land along it so that you could get a nice house with neighbors just like yourself, and you could take the streetcar down to the bay and across the bay and to your job in the city. And that was all it was about, just about moving people back and forth and making as much money as you could from streetcar fares and land sales and so on. So when it came to creeks, it was easy just to, cover them up, turn them into tunnels, and just put them out of mind. And so they were doing that starting in the 1880s, particularly in the 1890s. And this was at the same time, probably in reaction to it, of the City Beautiful movement, which is really important in East Bay history, especially in Berkeley and Oakland. And the thought leaders of the time were writing books and giving lectures to the public, and by the public they meant homeowners, the middle class people, about beauty, about cities are all about beauty, and they had the idea, creeks are beautiful. You could build roads along creeks, and they are beautiful places to drive cars. To take motor tours of these beautiful places. The eye wants to see greenery instead of tawdry houses and buildings and so on. And they said that the creeks should all be preserved because they're beautiful, and of course they are. There was no ecological argument at all. It was mainly about land values and the quality of life in the 1890s style. But their arguments fell on deaf ears. But there was some successes. There was a big success. I would call Lake Merritt a success. Mm-hmm. The city acquired all the land around the shores of the lake and built it up into a world-class park that happened to be that wasn't called a wildlife refuge at the time, and but
Lake
there was a
Merritt
great
was
success.
preserved, but one of my favorite chapters from your book, even though it was so devastating to learn about, was how there was a proposal at the time that actually was going to connect Lake Merritt with the headwaters of Trestle Glen Creek or Indian Gulch Creek up in the Oakland Hills. And there was a proposal, right, to make this greenway that would have kind of weaved its way all the way from the lake up to the hills. And that was basically very close to passing, but it was basically beat back by the kind of people who were worried about the city losing tax revenues, right, from the property values.
Yeah, what inspired the remark that it was a great failure was I pulled that from a very influential planning report in 1897. No, it was later than that. It was after the city wanted to acquire the land in Trestle Glen. Trestle Glen Creek is, as I said in Chapter 7 of Deep Oakland, I had a whole chapter about Trestle Glen Creek because it was a relatively well-preserved creek. It was well-preserved because you couldn't build houses on it in the 1890s. It was kind of undesirable because it was marshy, it was swampy, it was floodplain. Mm-hmm. And people would rather have views and fresh air, and you get those on the ridge tops. Mm-hmm. So all the residential developments were aimed at ridge tops. And that left Trestle Glen Creek unoccupied for many years. And they started an amusement park in it. And that's where the name Trestle Glen came from. It was actually the name of an amusement park, started in 1893. And the trestle was one of the streetcar lines. They built it. It came to the creek, and it built this big 40-foot structure, built with timber, and the streetcar would just sail across the gorge, and on into the Crocker Highlands area. And they got the trestle, they got the amusement park down in the creek, in the bed of the creek, and it worked great for and then the panic of 1893 happened. It was America's worst depression at the time. It lasted for 4 years. And so the whole scheme went crashing down, and that was the end, basically the end of the effort to try and save the whole creek, to make a beautiful mile-long park that would have gone from the lake all the way up and over Trestle Glen Road and down into Diamond Canyon. It could have been awesome.
Yeah.
And that was cited for many years afterward as just the most awful thing that could have happened to Oakland. We could have had so much beauty. Well, and yet Trestle Glen is a beautiful neighborhood. It's a beautiful residential neighborhood to this day. And it's exactly the kind of beautiful residential development that they were arguing for at the time.
Yeah.
So, their arguments were at cross purposes, and the creek was the victim.
Well, I think it's going to be too late to restore Trestle Glen Creek anytime soon, but Glen Echo Creek, we might be seeing some transformations. There already have been some. So, Jennifer, I know you've been involved with that. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the projects that have, sort of reinvigorated Glen Echo Creek in recent years and what might be on the horizon? Because I feel like there could be some exciting restoration activity happening there in the coming years.
Yes, there is. So there has been, as in the trivia you learned, there's 2 parks along Glen Echo Creek that are city parks. There's Glen Echo Creek Park. Now I'm not remembering. There's Oak Glen Park. So there has been a creek restoration project that's already been completed. I think maybe it was like 10 or 15 years ago now at Glen Echo Park. But on the horizon, there's a creek restoration project planned for Oak Glen Park. And so that's also a Measure DD, came out of Measure DD. As part of Measure DD, there was a prioritized creek restoration list created, and so this project is on that list.
By the way, if anyone hasn't ever been to that park, it's kind of a hidden gem.
It is.
Again, it's sort of right behind like where Auto Row used to be along Broadway, behind the grocery outlet, essentially. That's like sort of my landmark
Richmond
over there.
Boulevard. It's also close to Kaiser.
If people walk over there and check it out, it's one of those parks where you could probably live in Oakland your entire life, but if you don't live in that neighborhood, you never know about it. Exactly. And when you stumble on it, you're just like, it feels like you're in nature all of a sudden, out of nowhere. It's like surrounded by residences on all sides, but it's this incredible little sliver of nature. And I think it gives you a real sense of, the possibilities of what happens when creek restoration is successful.
Yeah, it is a very sweet little park. And there's been a community, there's a group, Friends of Oak Glen Park, that have been taking care of that park and doing some wonderful little trail improvements and things around that park. But it also is a creek that suffers from invasive plants just covering everything. There's ivy, and I think there's a bunch of thornless blackberry growing everywhere there. Mm-hmm. I think that's what I remember from going out there last time. But so the good thing is it's on our list. It's something that we're going to work on. Unfortunately, we don't know what the timeline is for that because we don't have the funding secured yet. So we don't, it's conceptual. Right now we have conceptual designs, but we are still working on getting funding for design and construction. And the general overall goals for that project are to get in there and remove all that nasty English ivy and, replace that with native plants, incorporate some park improvements to connect the community to the creek, and improve water quality, reduce flood risk. There are some really steep and eroding banks there, so doing something with the banks, probably trying to lay them back a little bit. That's all, to be determined. But it's a project that I've been looking forward to happening. So we don't know when it's going to happen, but it is on the horizon.
Christina, maybe that's a park that you could take your students to when that project starts happening. So I would imagine getting, kids involved with that kind of transformation would be really like educational.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Restoration projects are one of the main things that help engage students, like getting them outside and doing anything that we say hands-on, but like pulling weeds, they love. Planting, they love. The graphing and mapping, they still love because because they got to pull the plants, right? They got to plant the plants. They got to say, this is the space that now I have more pride and ownership in because I got to work in it. And it's not just Lake Merritt. Like Lake Merritt is because I went to Oakland High, you know, that was the space where we focused a lot of our time, right? But I learned about like love of science in communities all over the place, and my students come from all over the place. So I always look for where are the gems, where are the historical spaces, where are the hidden creeks in their neighborhoods, and what does the history look like, and how can we work together to really highlight some of the things that they care about. Miss Noonan, just to go back one more time, for me, I couldn't do a lot of this work if I didn't have internships that paid. And Miss Noonan was really good at finding money. She was really good at finding all these different projects that connected to science. And I mean, one of my favorites was the remote operated vehicle project. She found money to get us to go to Monterey and build these remote operated vehicles with another community partner, right? Yeah. And we put it in Lake Merritt. We got to, I know it didn't work.
Wait, so was this like a submarine?
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Deep sea vehicles. Yeah. But I bring that story up to just to highlight there's so many different different ways that you can look at the science behind these spaces that we want to emphasize the belonging. And I learned that from Ms. Noonan.
Yeah.
It's just like a big playground out.
Yeah.
Katie, do you want me to ask you a question, or should we open it up to the audience and see if anyone?
I just want to be sure to be able to show my closing slides. To
Yeah, definitely. Oh, okay,
Let's do it.
sure.
Get it ready.
Yes, we have Noelle. You had a question in back there. Do you want to hand the microphone up for a second? Here, can I hand you the mic for a second, real quick?
Yeah. Good evening to everyone. I grew up here in the city of Oakland, and I had the opportunity to manage Lake Merritt for 8 years under Jerry Brown when he was the mayor of Oakland. So he said, Noelle, I'm going to hire you to manage the lake, but I'm going to give you a city pickup truck, and you got to have it loaded every day. But I'm going to put you at Lake Merritt. That'll be your office, and you're going to be at the Rotary Nature Center because we got to build the Rotary Nature Center. And it made it very clear that, because Jerry Brown would walk the lake every day, right? And he would, Noelle, I saw trash in the water, you got to go get it. We never saw a piece of trash in the water, and we never saw it certainly on the sidewalks, right? But you got to remember what Lake Merritt used to be. It is,
and how it used to smell.
It is. Lake Merritt is the jewel of Oakland.
Yeah.
Throughout the country, Lake Merritt was known as the jewel of Oakland. Why? We had even had the U.S. Olympics rowing tryouts here. Well, there's my other tryouts. But anyway, so Lake Merritt was a place, the most beautiful locations, not only in Oakland, but throughout the state. And just to give you an example, what it can become, because it's not that today. You see all those Rosa lights? We helped, when I was here, we put them up because the veterans facilities across the street. And they're the ones that generated that we lighted up in the evening for lighting. I used to have the police riding on horseback around Lake Merritt. I used to have the parks ranger housed at Lake Merritt. Remember that, right across this? Anyway, so we had many opportunities, but I want to remind you that Lake Merritt was the center. When we won the basketball championship with the Warriors, where did they come? They came touring downtown. They came to Lake Merritt to celebrate. And the Kaiser Convention, we finally rebuilt it, but that's what Cal used to play their basketball games. All my high school graduations happened right there. right? But I think and we brought the Catholic Church with the cathedral at the same time. But now PG&E now bought that facility at Lake Merritt, right? That huge building right there at the lake. PG&E now owns it, but now they also bought the building behind it. Right, there used to be like a shopping center, all kinds of stuff. Now that PG&E owns that building, and on top of that building is a real nice reception area with gardens and all that. So that's PG&E's, and there's other businesses coming. But anyways, I just want to remind you that, Lake Merritt is the jewel of Oakland, and we got to get back. Well, we don't see trash in the water because we never used to see that, and I'm trying to work with Public Works to do that. Because we used to be there daily, taking care of it. But I need your help at the same time to make sure that we in government do our job. But Lake Merritt is the jewel of Oakland, and that's what it's known for. Used to be to attract many. And I mean, you look at the plaza there was music there every weekend. Carlos Santana used to play there. That's where one of the places he got started. Right? Even Beyonce showed up to play there. So you had many entertainers that came out of Oakland, because Oakland, at one time growing up here, Oakland was the 5th largest market in the country when it came to professional athletes, recruiting professional athletes and musical entertainments that came out of this area. But anyways, I just want to share you the positive that Lake Merritt in Oakland can become. Thank you.
Was there another question over here?
Yeah, I really welcome what you said. Given your long-time perspective as a steward of the lake, and having worked directly with the lake in what I think we would all agree was one of the more effective city administrations in our lifetime, what do you think the Oakland government should be doing and could be doing now to return it to the state we talked about?
Yeah, because one of the challenges that Oakland has.
Maybe use the microphone again. Yeah.
When it comes to the cleanliness and the beautification, what Oakland has done governmental wise, we used to have a Parks and Recreation department that would clean the parks and that would clean Lake Merritt first, because they were located, all the trucks and vehicles were there. Remember that? They were right there at the lake, and that was a priority. Right? But now we took that department and we gave it to Public Works, which is on Edgewater and at the Coliseum, right? And then even now we took that Public Works and gave it to the Department of Transportation that oversees that activity. So, and you have many people that have never seen what happened here in Oakland coming from the outside. That it's the first time they ever recognize what's here and what used to be. And that's one of the challenges that we have today. And certainly, my daughters from Oakland High School, they would spend all their time at Rotary Nature Center. Where's Noah at? Fremont High School graduate. Well, he even worked and cleaned Lake Merritt. That was one of his part-time jobs after school. And but we got to get back to, make sure that our youngsters, homegrown, have an active role at the lake, because they're the ones that help build the Children's Fairyland, right? And I go to all their events at Children's Fairyland.
75th anniversary.
We have to get our kids back in the Fairyland and not sit there and waiting for something to happen. And this lady here, she was here from the beginning and understand what it used to look like. But anyway, so thank you. Thank you.
Isaac, were you going to say something?
If I may.
Sure.
First, I want to close quickly because I actually have to depart. I'm going to head up the Watershed to the Sierra to join my wife, who's volunteering up at camp. But before I left, I wanted to thank Councilmember Charlene Wong for also showing up, and for Councilmember Gao for showing up, because I've seen you around town so much lately in all the spaces that matter. And even though your district is elsewhere, you're always thinking about the whole city, and that experience and perspective is invaluable. And then, in my narrow, tiny little world of living here, it's wonderful. I'm glad you can all enjoy it. One thing that has grown significantly in the last 6 years has been sound, the rising volume of all things. Just would be curious people's perspective on that, every which way.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, my attitude is preliminary nostalgia because gasoline vehicles are on their way out. You know that the streets are already quieter. That's why the loud people stand out more. So I say, let's anticipate some nostalgia for the day when all the vehicles are electric and not explosive combustion vehicles.
Did anyone else have thoughts on that?
Do you guys want to say anything?
I mean,
About sound?
it's I have mixed feelings about like the increase in sound. I think that when it's more noisy in these spaces, it means people are finally enjoying their parks. And that's something that's wonderful. You know, we want kids and we want young adults, and we want everyone to be able to feel like they're welcome at places like Lake Merritt, and to genuinely feel like you are welcome in a place that you grew up in is a beautiful thing. And sometimes it gets noisy when there's things like dance or events or like just cool things, you know, barbecue at the lake. Those are things that bring people together and that get them to engage in things that they might not have had an opportunity to. So for those things, absolutely.
Good point. Good point. It does mean people might be using the lake more. Did you use in the park?
I wonder what it was like in the past days when they had big derbies and fireworks and so forth. That I think, we it might have been noisy then too, but I sympathize with people who have, it's too much noise sometimes. And so it's learning to live together. And, when we have a community here and people spend time at the lake together and do things, and there's stuff happening all around, I think that can contribute to that sense of maybe taking care of the other person as well as having fun yourself. But kids will be kids, so yeah. Okay. Yes. We have yes.
Yeah, hold on, let's pass the microphone so you can be heard on the live stream.
Sorry.
I would just like to say about the noise pollution that it is, when we talk about noise pollution, we're not talking about people enjoying the park. When we moved down to the lake from the Oakland Hills in 2016, every morning I could hear children. I could hear the birds, I heard the geese. People were picnicking. Now every weekend for hours, I listen to motorcycles, very, very loud motorcycles. And it's really damaging, I think, to not even to me so much as a number of older people who are badly affected by the constant noise. And that's a big problem that has changed. And the other thing I want to thank Councilmember Gallo for bringing up the issue of the trash in the lake. I'm here as a representative of Lake Merritt Institute. Katie is on our board too. And we have a contract with the city to clean the lake, and we work with many, many volunteers who are so loyal and so fantastic. We couldn't do it without them. But we're very worried about the budget crisis with the city, and we're hoping that there will be ways of continuing to increase the capacity to continue to clean the lake. So, thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah.
So, just on the budget question, something I'd love to know, and some of my background is I used to work for the EPA actually right before this job. I'm on the Sierra Club and also studied environmental engineering myself. I think sometimes when I think about urban bodies of water, so even though I'm from the East Bay, I spent a decade of my adulthood, especially my young adulthood, in New York City, and I remember, Hudson River was thought of as like, oh God, it was always like it. I think the contrast is then I went to visit Chicago, and oh my God, that the way that body of water, it is really inspirational, how crystal clear it is. It just is an amazing marvel to look at. And I guess I'm wondering, let's say there was $1 million, like if you could wave a magic wand, if there was $1 million, like what would you do with that money? And I want to also give a shout out because on Tuesday we're doing a vote, it's actually not a vote, sorry, but it's going to pass through the council, I'm sure, without controversy. But thank you for putting forward the permit to the algicides to address the harmful algae blooms in Lake Merritt. So that's coming through. But yeah, what would you do if you could wave a magic wand and had all the money in the world to address all the things with the lake?
Yeah. Jen, I think that one's for you. If you had a bigger budget, what are your dream projects? Money is the object.
I think it's funny that you said $1 million because we just got $1 million from Barbara Lee when she was still in Congress. There was some congressionally directed funding that she secured for Lake Merritt to address the dissolved oxygen issue. It was like in response to the fish kill, and so that's going to be that's a grant agreement that the EPA is administering, and we're going to be executing that grant agreement hopefully in the next couple months, and so we are going to be using that to study the lake. And Katie's going to be happy to hear that we are going to be trying to establish a baseline of like what lives in the lake. And we're also just going to be looking more at what is the water quality of the lake. And there's a lot of questions to answer. So, because the problem that we're dealing with or what we're trying to address, our priority right now is the dissolved oxygen, because we have these and the harmful algal blooms that are going to probably just increase in frequency because of climate change, but hopefully not. But we need some tools to deal with it. That's why we're going to council next Tuesday, and we're looking into other tools that we can, in the event of a harmful algal bloom, what can we do? But then we're going to use that almost $1 million to study the lake, and then to actually figure out what could improve the dissolved oxygen. So maybe it's adding some more aeration fountains, which we have one in the lake. And then we have an oxygenation system that's in the lake right now too, that is pumping dissolved oxygen.
Yeah, I think Katie, maybe we'll let you have the last word.
Thank you.
We've gone a little bit over time. So
yes. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Yeah. So I did not get asked the question of what was the water quality, what I'd seen over the period of time. Yeah. And I really applaud the city of Oakland for putting all of that money and all of that scientific expertise into monitoring the lake. I have to say that the lake's water quality has been pretty good. There was that one incident when we were invaded by a harmful algae from San Francisco Bay. Other than that, it hasn't all been all that bad. And I think that there's a lot we have to learn about the processes that control algae and the suitability of water systems and the biological community, Lake Merritt. There's a lot we need to know first, but I cannot say that it's become terrible. In fact, it's pretty much the same. And I think the scientific evaluations that I have seen have concluded that. So, but it's good.
If people want to keep up with the water quality, they can always tune in to your monthly.
We will send the link that Jen was talking about, where you can actually see.
Fun dashboard with lots of graphs.
Oh yeah, it's exciting. I go there every day.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep everyone here all night, so I just want to thank the Rotary Nature Center friends once again for organizing these wonderful monthly gatherings. All the panelists, Isaac for hosting us, all of you for showing up.
Thank you again so much for coming. Thank you to the City of Oakland for rebroadcasting our shows. And hope to see you soon. Thank you. Good night. Good night.